So I'm going to be talking a bit about velvet markets over the next 15 minutes. And then I'm going to ask, and I hope technology works for some of our reps over in the market to beam in and to give a live presentation from their point of view. And then I'm going to ask for three of the China Velvet Coalition parties to come up on stage, Ross Chambers, Sean Stevenson and Tony Cochrane, and we can form a bit of a panel for your questions. So I just do want to start off and acknowledge that in the velvet sector, it has been a tough year. It's been a tough year for all of us, for a real challenging year, and that's right through the chain from from you guys farming velvet or producing velvet right up into the markets. It's been absolutely challenging. The awesome news is that the velvet sector is resilient, and I'm doing a play on the words. The focus is you, but it is resilient. We have got great plans in place, as we all know, around the healthy food strategy. And we've got tremendously strong partnerships up in the markets now, as both in the healthy food sector and also in that traditional commodity trading sector. So that's the kind of the positive thing. Now, when we look back at the last season, it was a real uncertain start, and I don't need to tell you velvet producers about that. There's probably a bit of nervousness back in late September, early October, as a price was being formed. Importers really didn't understand the situation, and they were kind of faced with three key things. Firstly, financial outlay, so physically getting hold of money to be able to deposit into our exporters' banks so they could get out and start buying your velvet. Logistics, how are logistics going to play out? And boy, I think we heard that from their venison operators just before. And consumer demand, were they going to be buying too much, too little? How were things going to operate in this kind of COVID environment? But the good news is that we got some really good signals early on in the piece that underlying demand, consumer demand up in the markets in South Korea and in China were really positive. They were pretty strong. So we knew that wasn't the problem. It was literally getting product up to the market. This was consistent with what we had heard in terms of increasing consumption of health food products generally. And New Zealand food products were especially in high demand, things like kiwi fruit and other things as well. And once a price was established, so once we got things going, we could see that demand was massive, right, for people to get in, secure velvet and get containers on the water. So what I've got up here is a graph of our exports year to date, up until January, versus the same period last year. That's not to show that velvet has grown that much, so it has been skewed somewhat, but it shows that intensity of that start of the season. Again, our buyers had to make sure they can get out there and secure product and kind of get it moving. But that's a phenomenal graph when I show that for you guys. The orange being 2021 and blue being 2020. So normally, as you guys would know, velvet sells from October through until April, but pretty much by January, most of the deals have been done. When we look at prices in production, we know that production was up again between 5 and 10%. It seems consistent with where things have been going. But unfortunately, we know that prices did drop at Farmgate by between 10 and 15%. And when we had a look at this and we were starting to see what was coming through, we saw that this was perhaps a risk premium being put in place by our New Zealand velvet, by the velvet importers up in the markets, as they were kind of struggling through those three key factors that I mentioned just before. The feedback that I was getting was, of course, it's disappointing that prices did drop back this year. No one likes prices dropping back. But actually, largely people were relatively happy that product moved. So prices dropped back. Once we found that product, it started really moving through. So that was the good thing. There was some certainty in an uncertain world. And those supply chain disruptions occurred. Now, as I've just mentioned about the venison operators, they're all up here on stage kind of going through things. But for us, specifically in the velvet sector, Daly import was shut, and that's problematic. So it was shut from about December the 24th, right the way through till well after Lunar New Year. So I mean, containers that were on the water by early November, many of them still stayed either in a port or waiting to be offloaded or waiting to be cleared. There were high storage demurrage costs that were paid by the importers. So at that stage, the money had all been brought out here into New Zealand. So we're all paid, which is great, but their risk premium paid out for those importers. They actually end up paying a lot more because of the demurrage costs. And it took up to 4 months to clear some of those containers. That's a long time. So I guess it's just good to know what was happening up into that port. Now, for us, most of our velvet is destined either for offloading at Darien, for selling through the Darien Free Trade Zone, or slightly more of it going up to a place called Teeling, just north of Shenyang, and going in. So it gets offloaded at a internal port, inland port further up through into China. So it could only go through that port. So it wasn't like we could divert it and offload it into other ports for velvet. So it was a pretty ropey time. And like you've heard this morning, these logistics disruptions are tipped to continue for the foreseeable future, certainly over the course of this year. Those sea freight issues you've heard about, they will continue. And until passenger demand comes back onto commercial flights again, we're going to see expensive air freight as well. So these are things we've just got to come to grapple with. And of course, there are the potential for shutdowns. And our COVID situation in New Zealand here, we're pretty lucky to be able to meet like this and have a beer and a bit of a feed and a bit of a natter. But COVID could break out again, and our plants could be disrupted, or ports up in the markets, because let's face it, China has, from what the media say, China's been kind of dealing with COVID quite well, but they did shut this massive port down. This type of thing can happen again. COVID's still around, and by all accounts, getting worse in some markets, as we all know. So let's have a quick look at our markets. And I guess the first thing I want to say is it was a new way of operating for us at DINZ as well. I normally try and get up there a couple of times a year. So how do we try and connect with our key people? We try to have these things called Korean Virtual Market Tour, segmented for the times when I'd normally go up, just prior to the main selling season in October. And then normally around March, April, May, I've just finished the series to work with the big healthy food companies in terms of their promotion going into the valuable Chuseok or our spring, their autumn period, when velvet consumption lifts up. So our first Korean velvet market tour was held in May last year. And it was about reconnecting with the market. So it's quite novel and it seemed quite cool. And, watching on screen right now, a couple of our reps up in the market, and they took me around a little tablet or whatever and meet with the customers, and I was able to kind of go through things in it, and enabled a few more DINZ personnel. And you can see here the old science and policy manager and our environmental stewardship manager being able to connect with our customers well, and that all helps to underpin the kind of the story that we like to get across. The second one was about providing confidence, and I'm going to go through this in a bit more detail. So there was in October, trying to provide confidence that there was that underlying demand in the market, connecting with our customers and what have you up there. And the third one that was just finished a week ago was about continuing investment. And of course, we had meetings, particularly with our larger customers outside of these periods, whenever they needed to contact, hop on Zoom and kind of go through it. So this was so at branch chairs last year, and I know many of the people in this room here today. I see you down there, Mark and Grant and what have you. So I was able to video you guys, take little short snapshots of you. You're smiley there, John. Nice little short snapshots, video snapshots of you guys, because our customers love hearing from producers. They love hearing from producers. And we started the introduction off with a few words of wisdom from our Laoban, Mr. Moffat, giving some nice signals out, followed up by producers of velvet being passionate in what they do. There was a campaign launched by New Zealand Story called Made with Care, and we launched our Korean Virtual Market Tour one day after Made with Care was launched out. So following our brief snippets from farmers, we were able to play them the Made with Care advert and splice in a bit of velvet toward the end of what was going on there.
Why is New Zealand food and beverage so outstanding?
How long have you got?
New Zealand food is safe, so clean and so pure.
If you haven't tasted New Zealand food and beverage, you're missing out.
You can trust New Zealand seafood. It's sustainable and it tastes really good.
Manuka honey from New Zealand. It's just delicious and healthy for you and your family.
It's so yummy.
We've got wonderful pasture here to produce that safe and trusted milk.
Our grass-fed beef is so good because it's raised in a place like this. Check it out.
We're really proud that New Zealand lamb is eaten all around the world.
Caring for your land and people, being a good custodian or kaitiaki, it's everything to us.
New Zealand wine is all about freshness and energy. Tastes like it comes from nowhere else.
We're free to innovate because we're not bound by tradition, and we make sure that only the best quality goes to market.
The most important ingredient is care.
We make it and grow it with love.
A little bit of care and a little bit of love can change everything.
Donald White, you should have been charging me a royalty for that photo, I think. But that kind of resonates well with the whole New Zealand ink type of thing. Our Korean velvet buyers, when they see this type of stuff, they automatically associate Nogyong New Zealand velvet with all those images that you've just seen. And we followed this up straight away with advertising on the whole back cover of Minjok News and ACOM News, the two leading Oriental medicine publications, and able to kind of talk a bit about our story. So we're passionate farmers. We produce our Nogyong with care, but some of the other aspects around our environment and governance and what good people we are as well. So it was a nice thing to kind of follow up with. The most recent market visit is about reinvesting, as I said previously. And so that for us was a bit about reinvesting in research. So we timed it in with the launch of our new Velvet technical manual. I have only a few copies of these, but for anyone that is interested, they're in the Valtrack stand out in the events area, $20 each. No, they're free of charge, of course. But we videoed Stephen Haynes, and he kind of led things off, which was really nice, talking about the new Velvet Industry Technical Manual, which is packed with great new research, and then also talking about the immune function research that the Innovation Steering Committee have kicked off for hopefully delivery by this time next year. Once we hit the end of our meetings, so these meetings were kind of held at 45 or an hour, minute intervals, and then unplugged, and the guys would rush off to the next meeting and we'd plug back in. We were aiming to try and get a sub 60 to deliver the Korean version of these Velvet Industry Technical Manuals. So we've had them translated into Korean, simplified Chinese for the mainland Chinese market, and traditional Chinese for the Taiwanese markets. And we always finish off our virtual market tours by engaging with the embassy. Our relationship with the embassy up in South Korea is fantastic, and they really do support us with our endeavours up there. Normally I like to finish off on a Friday evening after I've gone around the markets, be able to sit down, chew the fat with the Trade Commissioner and with the Ambassador and their awesome staff up there, and then maybe go out for a makju, which is a beer, and have a bit of a natter about how things are up in South Korea. So we did that. Innes and I finished that week off by having a good catch up with Ambassador Philip Turner. We also connected, we were really lucky, our new Trade Commissioner was going up in October, November last year, and I asked him if I could give him a 2-day Velvet induction. So we got him out to the Jagidong markets. That's him holding the stick up there of Velvet at Mr. Bung's factory in Jagidong. Then him going to visit a couple of clients, including LG, and with the Ambassador into seeing New Origin, Yuhan Pharmaceuticals, and even got a write-up in a magazine as well. So, good exposure. It's the type of stuff that you like to get. And as I say, these guys are outstanding. And we've got some in-market representatives in South Korea and China that really kind of got around for us too. What did we find? We found that more products were launched. So there was more investment in the market. And this is just a few of the ones that I've clipped off from our news readings this year alone. There were a whole swag last year. And from the kind of the prettier colours, you can see a lot of them where they're aiming at some of our female audience. Chung-nok for women was launched, which reportedly is going really well, and for children as well. So it's nice to get that nice breadth of customer group. Reportedly, these products are going really well. They all contain New Zealand Nogyong, New Zealand Velvet. So that was certainly very heartening. Now, what was also quite cool is you guys all understand the history of Velvet, that we're selling up into the traditional Chinese medicine, so through the Jagidong markets. Then we engaged with our closest partner up there called KGC, which I'm sure you've all heard lots about, with 1,000 retail outlets as high-end nutraceutical stores throughout South Korea. Then we started engaging with people on, celebrities on home shopping channel networks, being able to kind of pump their products out through telephone and what have you, orders online, and of course, Yuhan, New Origin, cafe style. One of the areas we're quite keen to see coverage was to get into corner stores. And what we've seen over the last 6 months is a big food company called Promotional that launched a New Zealand velvet product that's available on corner stores through the G25 system. And what's super cool is I've got a few of these that I can dish out to any good questions, I guess, during our panel session. I think Rob will hand those out shortly, which will wake you all up for the next session, I guess. So what do we learn? The companies were generally quite positive about velvet, about the season that they've just had, but they did want to temper that with the economic impact. So while South Korea, from an economic perspective, was the leading country in terms of economic performance, they still declined. Their economy still did shrink, and they said that did impact some higher value items. And we all would love to think, and I know I love thinking that velvet is, so its main use is immune function and anti-fatigue. So I was kind of thinking, well, I'll see what happens here. Most people turned in the initial stages to probiotics and vitamins rather than to velvet, but velvet still did get a bit of an upswing there. We know that offline and duty-free stores suffered significantly. Duty-free stores, as you can imagine, particularly with the Chinese tourists coming across, just ceased overnight. But you kind of learn these new words when you're going through these Korean virtual market tours. Untact. Untact is the way of doing business up in Korea. So it doesn't just kind of bring in the video conferencing and stuff, but it's all about pay wave. It's all about how you pay, but not connecting with people. So Untact online stuff was doing really, really well. And, we've been in a market that's been growing really, really well, the healthy food market. We're about 80% of a whole new market that we developed about 10 years ago, and it's grown significantly. But we can't expect to have that market to ourselves entirely forever. The Russians are starting to attack us with their velvet and with their campaigns as well. So they're out there. They're getting some traction in some areas. If you remember my presentation last year, I was talking about our consumer, our target audience is kind of a Korean female, professional female aged between 30 to 50 years old, because she's the decision maker for her family, herself, her children and her husband. Russian Velvet is targeting the kind of the older male generation and what they do, and they sponsored this K-pop band for their target audience, and I see a few of you guys probably might buy some Russian Velvet, Steve. But they do this nice little thing. But actually it is gaining traction. So it is, they are doing well. But there is one way for us to target them. So another thing I was kind of hearing back from companies over the last couple of weeks as we've been engaging is this concept around environment, social and governance. And that's one area that New Zealand really stands out on its own. So we know that we're in this awesome environment. Our social, our connection, when we have people coming out visiting you guys, and I know many of you guys have hosted lots and lots of people onto your farms. So that social, that connection and governance is the things like the RCS and Valtrack and our strict government oversight, making their products safe is something that stands out for us. So we are well positioned in this market. I could go on for hours about the promotional activity. Of course, we're going to support our biggest bit of funding and connection is with KGC, biggest client, but there was a whole lot of other stuff that we did in the markets to a lesser degree. And I've got a bit of a snapshot on a bit of a velvet promotion that we did for LG, because of course they couldn't come out here. So we did a video presentation. Big thanks to White Farming for hosting the people and for Trev for putting things together. I've just got a little bit of a snapshot on this, but you can kind of get this feeling of the ESG. There's actually part of the video that I'm not going to show because it'll take too long, of Rob Dunbar talking about the strict management around the RCS, but.
In the middle of farm. So how high are we here?
Right here, we're about 800 metres, but the mountains around us are about 1,300 metres high. That means that the summers are hot and dry and the winters are very cold, and it's a great climate for growing velvet.
Right, so are the deer free to roam across the farm?
So the deer are grazed in large fields, so they have lots of space and are free from stress.
Right, so actually the place where very freely, just they can move around everywhere.
Yeah, well, we shift the deer regularly, so they always have lots of fresh feed to eat, and this gives the pasture time to regenerate.
So a nice connection there from Regan and Ange. And now on to China, a rapidly emerging market. So we know that exports are increasing. But I will just put a note there that obviously there were a lot of port disruptions. A lot of our product that was produced last season has been held up going through. Now that may create more demand to make sure that there aren't any disruptions. As we know, there is always product up in the markets prior to our season, but we're just unsure about what that disruption may mean. We know that a healthy food strategy is now underway and that companies are are starting to investigate the potential for New Zealand velvet as a health functional food. And one of the awesome things that you guys may have picked up is the three companies coming together, approaching Dairy Industry New Zealand and forming this China Velvet Coalition. As I say, the three members will come up on stage. They've got their photo there with the Trade Commissioner from Shanghai when he came out just over Christmas. This is something that really commercialises, so it gets a bit more grunt than just industry going up there to talk about the healthy food side of things, and it plays a benefit to the wider industry. So if one of these companies, or all three, or whoever, is able to satisfy this healthy food strategy, the impact, as we've seen in South Korea, will be much wider to all the partners across our sector. So it's something that I'm pretty excited about. Taiwan, I'm not going to talk about this too much because Seamus from Taiwan will be beaming in and talking a bit about the new KGC launch of their product. So Korean Ginseng Corp through their Taiwanese-based stores launching their New Zealand Velvet product, and of course we supported that, and it's a market that could be quite significant. So Justin, it's too early to predict and give you a price for Vena Velvet next year, despite you bailing up a bit. What will next year look like? Who knows? At this stage, it is too early to predict. We do know that production will continue to increase out there. There is some good confidence in the industry, and that's a great thing, but we've just got to make sure that that increase is in line with our increasing demand. We know that there will continue to be increasing demand for health products, and we know that velvet's going to get some recognition in that space. There's another term that came up in the meetings, revenge spend. So that was quite neat to see. That there could be the potential for revenge spend, people spending on higher value items such as velvet in the market as well. So overall, we've got a relatively stable and growing industry in the velvet side of things, to kind of capture off what you talked about, Innes, a bit earlier on. And I'm certainly really heartened when I don't open the papers, I go online and see all the new products starting to come through. So the investment is occurring in both China and South Korea. So things are looking pretty good in the velvet sector. Thanks heaps, guys. Actually, I do have there's one other slide here. I've got a message so yesterday I played a message from the Trade Commissioner in South Korea. I've just got a message to you guys from our ambassador, Mr. Philip Turner in Seoul, and then I'm going to hopefully beam in our reps from the markets.
안녕하십니까. My name is Philip Turner. I'm New Zealand's ambassador here in Seoul to the Republic of Korea. I want to talk to you briefly today about New Zealand's exports of deer velvet, one of our fastest growing export industries. Korea takes 2/3, 65% of all of the deer velvet that is produced in New Zealand. It's a great example both of New Zealand companies partnering with Korean companies, and also of how New Zealand has been able to move from volume to value in our production. Korean consumers are very demanding. They have very high standards of food safety and quality, and they really look for natural origin of their products. New Zealand is able to satisfy Korean consumers on all of those aspects. We are well known for our natural beauty, and now, thanks to the Veltrack program put in place by Deer Industry New Zealand, we have a world-class traceability program which responds to Korean consumers' desire for clear indications of safety and quality at all points of the chain. It's a great success story. I invite Korean consumers to enjoy our products. Thank you.
It's a pretty good endorsement from our officials up in the market. Now, I can see all three on line there, guys. I'd like to welcome you to the three velvet experts up in the market. So in the big picture here, we have Jong-gu Jung, who I've been working with now for about 8 or so years in South Korea, in Seoul. Very much instrumental in terms of our health functional food strategy. In the top right-hand corner, we've got Felix Shen, a new addition to the Velvet team, although he is acting on behalf of the China Velvet Coalition as well. And down the bottom there, we've got Seamus Harris, been working with Seamus for about 8 years as well. And he's based in Taiwan. So I'm going to invite you, Jong-gu, first up, mate, if you can go through a couple of slides about the Korean market.
Right. So I guess my screen is on sharing.
Certainly is, mate.
Okay, cool. So last 10 years of South Korean market for the deer velvet is very much busy time. So a lot of changes in consumer trend, supply chain, even regulation and tariff situation. So we've been working with all the aspect of this area. So we're talking with the government or talking to the local deer farmers with the Rhys Griffiths and traditional medicine doctors, also new players with the emerging channel like e-commerce. But among those many activities today, I would like to just touch the showcase a little bit about the health food brand customers. So many of you might remember the 2015, I guess, the Napier conference. So we had Dr. Zhang from the KGC, Korea DINZ Corporation. He was the chief of R&D back then. Since then, KGC launched a lot of product with a New Zealand deer velvet called Chunno, and it becoming one of the important brand portfolio for KGC, not only KGC, but also entire Korea health food brand market. So this is the last 10 years, and now you can buy lots of New Zealand deer velvet product from the department store to the OTC and even corner store these days. So you can buy a lot of you can buy various channel the deer velvet products. So over 40 companies in South Korea using deer velvet as an ingredient for their health food, and around 80% are using New Zealand origin from our research. So what kind of our prospect for the next 10 years is like a differentiation. So as you see, the New Zealand story is outstanding with the competition with the Russian or competition with the Chinese or even Korean local velvet products, or as an ingredient or as just a prescription for the Oriental medicine clinic. What now is you need competing storytellers as you need to stand out among those New Zealand velvet users. So you might need from the Korean customer perspective, you might need a newly discovered benefit or deer velvet, or regularly registration of the health functional food, or transparent traceability, like maybe that's the future of the vet track, or closer relationship with the New Zealand farmers. Like it could be a case of the SP Corporation sponsorship to the environmental award, or closer to a specific farm from the Korean customer. It's like you have a case study about the Yuhan Care to solo contract with one of the farm in New Zealand. So last 10 years was very busy to make a standout New Zealand out of other, compared to other country of origin. This, from this to the next 10 years could be the competition between brands in Korean perspective, Korean customers who using New Zealand deer velvet.
I'll now invite Seamus. Are you able to stop sharing, Jong-gu? And Seamus, can you share your slides from Taiwan?
Okay, so everyone can see me and hear me. I'll just say a few words about what's been happening in Taiwan over the last year or so. 2020 was quite a good year for New Zealand velvet in Taiwan. Taiwan is historically, it's been a fairly traditional market and quite a small market, mostly with traditional consumption, people buying from TCM shops, maybe direct off farms, that kind of thing. But in August 2020, KGC launched their first New Zealand deer velvet product in Taiwan. Now, KGC are a household name already in Taiwan for their ginseng. They've got roughly 60 of their own branded stores through Taiwan, plus penetration into channels like hypermarkets, convenience stores, that kind of thing. So their new product is something very new for Taiwan. And there's been very many sort of positive things about it, including the premium positioning. The retail price for this one is roughly 300 New Zealand dollars for a 1 month supply. So it's pretty premium. The New Zealand origin has been highlighted through the promotional materials for it. And they've used a famous local, or not local, Korean star, a guy called Lee Min-ho. You probably haven't heard of him in New Zealand, but he's very famous up here. And this product seems to have got off to quite a good start. And it's attracted attention from local health food companies as well. So DINZ and myself, we're working now with at least one other Taiwan company that's quite interested in coming out with something similar. We'll see how that goes. It's very much a work in progress, and it's been slowed down a little bit by the pandemic, but they're still interested, and they visited New Zealand. And KGC has been heartened enough that we know that they're considering launching some more products. So it's looking like there's a platform being established in Taiwan for some good growth going forward. At the same time, there are a few challenges on the regulatory side. Historically, Taiwan has regulated deer velvet in foods in a fairly loose kind of manner, as in deer velvet can, of course, be sold as a traditional Chinese medicine, but simultaneously it can be sold as a regular food. There's absolutely no difference between these two categories in the past. Now, that seems to have annoyed the traditional Chinese medicine sector, so they've been pressuring the FDA here over the last couple of years. As a result of that pressure, things are almost certainly going to change. It looks like what will happen is that deer velvet products with a low dose of deer velvet will continue to be able to be sold as foods. If the dose exceeds a certain threshold, then they won't have to be pharmaceuticals. They'll be allowed to be sold as functional foods. But to sell a product as a functional food, there's going to be some kind of registration process. So that will create a bit of a barrier, but it doesn't look like an unsurmountable barrier, because we have companies here that are already looking at how to do this, and they're confident that they can do it. And in any case, existing products, such as the KGC's Tianlu Everytime, which was launched last year, it's not going to be affected by the new regulations, because KGC designed the formulation with this potential change in mind, because it's been known about for at least a couple of years. So I think that kind of sums up where Taiwan is at the moment. And if anyone has any questions for me, then just let me know later.
Excellent. Thanks heaps for that, Seamus. And now, always regulatory barriers that we're hitting, but fortunately, China doesn't really have regulatory barriers, does it, Felix? No, sorry, there's a bit of an internal joke. A lot of regulatory barriers. So, Felix, remembering he's only just kind of started on the velvet side of things, we are tremendously excited to have him as part of the team. I'll just invite Felix to say a few words now too, if that's all right.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Felix Chen from TCN Shanghai, now representative for DINZ and Coalitions, China Velvet Coalitions. I only joined the PCNZ for 2 months, so I could not share too much on the velvet industry in China, but I'm sure there are some interesting numbers to show you to let you know the update for China. The first number is 230 million people. Actually, during the past long holiday, early of May, there are 230 million people, young generations, go out for travel around the country. So it's everything in China nowadays return to normal, including the economy, the travel, and health food consumptions. The traveling people nowadays during the long holiday is around 20% increase than 2019. So nowadays in China, everything become to normal. The only difference is people in public areas only need to wear the masks. And then I think the set of numbers just updated last week. I think nowadays in China, we still own the biggest population, 1.4 billion people in China nowadays. And although the population growth rate is becoming slower, but now the total population is still growing. And the biggest changes nowadays, China, the whole societies became, the old people become, the numbers become bigger. So nowadays it's around 18.7% of the total population is more than 80. And also good things is more people are university educated. So that means in China nowadays, more people getting old and more people are well educated. They are all focusing on the health and wellness. They would like to put more money on the medicines, medicals, and also health food, and also the huge market for the consumption upgrading. The last schedule I want to share with you is nowadays in China, there were bright future for the health food. So first thing is the GDP per capita in updated 2020. Nowadays, so the second years, we above 10,000 US dollars. And if you take the numbers for Shanghai, Beijing, and Shenzhen, Guangzhou, the tier 1 cities, the number must be above 20,000. It's very close to the developed countries nowadays. And the second thing is very interesting. Nowadays, there are some investigation from the government media. The consumption list of the young generations from age 18 to 25, a majority of them would like to spend money on tourism, healthcare, and education training. So I think for health food, not only attractive for the older generation, but also for the young generation, it's very interesting in China nowadays. And the last part is nowadays in China, the spend on the average spend on health food is quite low. It's only $30 US dollars in China. It's still has a big gap compared with US people and the South Korean. So in China, the population and society change a lot. Everything back to normal. The economy grow faster. People become more rich and educated. They are willing to spend money on the health food. I think the above it could be nature and really health benefit for the people. So that must have a bright future. I only joined the industry for 2 months. I hope I can share more next time. So that's all for my points.
With all the extra revenue, now that you're over $100 million, and what are the key areas that we need to spend that levy money that you're collecting into going forward?
So that's great. I'm going to pass it over to our board member sitting on here because you're going to get sick of me talking.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me? That's a great question, Richard, and it's one for the board too. That we're well aware of that. Venison and velvet are quite evenly matched as far as the revenue side of deer industry in New Zealand is going in regards to levies. So I think it might be around 45-55 in favour of venison at the moment, but that could easily be 50-50. That's not an aspiration, that's just the way the trend is going. So the biggest thing really is looking after our licence to operate, which is animal welfare, and Valtrac backs that up. So that's an investment in itself. We believe that there is potential for huge growth, and that growth has been shown in South Korea already. We want to replicate that into China. So that's going to require a lot of resource to beat down those regulatory barriers and apply people on the ground, such as Felix, to represent New Zealand as a country and also our product. So I answered it.
Question at the front here from John.
Yeah, hi. Are the current velveting guidelines, grading guidelines, are they fit for purpose?
I suppose that's me again. I think there's some tweaks to be made, John, and that's mainly around the mere fact that velvet has changed. We've seen that with Spiker particularly, and also the size of velvet, bigger Super A heads. There's an easy trend going towards the non-traditional shapes and styles, and how that lines up with the market and the end use of the product. So yes, there are some conversations we need to have, and we're looking to get those in place before next season. Also hopefully amend the grading guidelines with some better pictures and descriptions so that both farmers and buyers are completely clear on where we're going. Yep.
If I can just add on to what you've said now, from the CK point of view, as more and more product becomes processed, our company's focus is more on actual growing time, less than 55 days. It's the work that we've done, and I think the work that the industry has done shows that there is very good bioactives in that product, and that's what we've been, the indication that we've been given from our customers and companies overseas is that that's what they'll be demanding.
So, sorry if I could. So I think in order to answer your question, John, I think both from a traditional point of view, there's some tweaks there is definitely some tweaks that we need to do. Our aspirations of the health food market, which appears to be paying off, means that we may need to revisit, what's happening inside that antler, what are the amino acids and whatever is doing, because our new customer is different than the aesthetic one. So it's a conversation for later, but it's good to start this conversation now. Ross, did you want to make a comment?
Look, thanks, Rhys. It was a very good question, John. There is an appetite for updating and more clarity on the grades. It's a conversation that we have regularly with our clients, and we know it's a topic of conversation with farmers. So I think it's high time we update it and maybe put it into a slightly newer format, as Tony alluded to, and in terms of its usability.
Just a question. First of all, congratulations on the three companies and the coalition going forward. It shows the strength that we've got going forward as an industry. Can we just have a little bit of commentary from you guys about how you see that working and how you maintain your market differences, but work together for New Zealand velvet, so to speak?
Thanks, Grant. All the companies have seen that there's a common objective here, so it hasn't been difficult, and I don't perceive it to be difficult in the future for us to focus on that goal, because what we're looking to achieve in China is something that's quite different. Something doesn't exist at the moment. So we don't have to worry about what happens elsewhere or what might have happened in the past. We're able to focus very tightly on making progress into the opportunity in China that we see is there, but it's going to require work, and that's why I speak for Pavelco. I hope I speak for everyone on the commercial partners, that we are stronger together. This is not something we feel we could approach successfully individually. That's why we've joined with DINZ. We've got support from NZTE. They see this as a viable strategy for smaller entities to combine their resources and make progress where otherwise they wouldn't. So we're all entirely committed to this objective. So I think it is early days, but I'm very confident that we're applying things the right way around, and that we'll be able to make it work, because it's a different circumstance than other business.
Tony?
Well, Ross said it well. Look, just to back that up, we're three individual competitors, and we're not certainly not forming a commercial venture between the three of us. We're maintaining our individual rights to be able to deal with who we choose to deal with. What may come of this further down the track, we've got an open mind to, and that's probably the most important thing. We've also got to work within the restrictions of the competitive laws or anti-competitive laws, both here and offshore. So we're very wary of that, and it's really good to have the backing of NZTE, the government, and DINZ, of course, in this partnership. One thing, the three of us amount to quite a lot of critical mass or volume within 3 players, and not confusing or stopping that by having too many players and too many opinions. So it's very early days, but already we're excited about the potential, and we're hoping that the world's our oyster and we may just not be producing enough product. So
I can only echo the comments made by Ross and Tony. I think, as I've both mentioned, we all bring a lot of expertise to the table, and essentially moving forward will help to make sure that we have a good measured approach to this new segment in the market.
I do have a question here from the team at Broccoli Deer Farms. Is it helpful for producers to prove high velvet content? And if so, will that be given a premium over lower content velvet?
This might come back to your knowledge in terms of the amino acids and stuff.
And anyone from online as well?
Can you ask the question again, sorry?
Yeah, certainly. Is it helpful for producers to prove high velvet content? And if so, will that be given a premium over lower content velvet?
I think that moving forward, being able to demonstrate the quality of the product will result in a demand being paid in the market.
Hopefully that answers your question. I'll go down to Ian and then Mark, and then we will have to wrap up if there's any others.
Thanks very much, Sarah. This is a question probably directed more at Felix. We've just had a presentation from Rhys, which is, as usual, very positive about what's going on, and we're looking at the potential success of the coalition agreement. You've just come on board in the last couple of months. What is the size of the market that you see that's in front of you? Because you've obviously taken this position on with looking at the opportunity that you can see for yourself. And we've seen a big period of growth in New Zealand over the last 8 years in terms of the tonnage of velvet produced. How much further are we going to go?
I think it's really hard to make the exact calculations on what's the future. But nowadays, there are some numbers I can provide. It is for the health food and medicines in China nowadays. I think the total products containing velvet, the market size is around 40 to 50 million RMB nowadays. And for the total health food industry, the market size is around 300 billion RMB. It's a quite huge market in China. So we just have a small product containing with deer velvet.
My question's following on a little bit from. Ready? Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. My question follows on a little bit from Ian with regards to the new market in China. We've heard all about what Veltrac will bring for market access, as well as opportunities for value add within Korea. Do all you guys see that can be then translated into being a value, or Veltrac being a value for value add within China in the functional food market?
Keep things rolling, Sarah. Definitely. Am I turned on? Yep. Definitely that is probably one of the first things that these big health food companies or beverage companies are going to ask us is, where's your traceability? Where's your product integrity? And, you know, of course, health, immune is on the top of the list at the moment for the consumer. So for us to break into a market that already has its own local supply, and we're going to prove that New Zealand Velvet can compete against that product, we're really going to have that story behind it. And that's going to relate right back to the producer and also the relationships in between.
Fantastic. A great place to leave it there. Please, a big round of applause to our China Coalition, Ross Chambers, Sean Stevenson, Tony Cochrane, as well as Felix, Seamus and Jean-Q there in Korea. Thank you very, very much. Big round of applause. Fantastic work. And to Rhys.